Hi, I'm Santosh. I wanted to share with you some thoughts that I've had recently around the times that we're living in right now and about the challenges that a lot of us are feeling at the moment through this seclusion type experience that we're feeling, through this global pandemic that's definitely a challenge for the world, something beyond which we probably haven't seen in many of our lifetimes. But to put things in perspective, I'll share a little something I saw recently that struck me as funny and kind of puts things in perspective. It said, "Our grandparents were asked to go to war. We're being asked to stay home and not hoard the toilet paper." Now, if we can look at things from the lighter side, that's one of our weapons to defeat feeling that we are alone or that we are having to suffer through this. So having a sense of humor definitely is a plus. And yet it is in many ways a very serious time. But at times like this, and especially with what we're being asked to do, it can feel very lonely. It can feel as though we are disconnected from each other and from the world in so many ways. If you even look at the terminology that's used, we're talking about sheltering in place. Now, what does shelter evoke? Generally, when you hear the word shelter, you think of a physical place, you think of a place of safety, a safe harbor, perhaps a place in the basement or underground where you would evade weapons and bombs or tornadoes or some such thing. So there's a sense of hearing the word shelter and possibly identifying with a place of safety, a physical safety, and often a place that's smaller. Social distancing, another one. Well, that's a thing that we're all being required to do. But what does that evoke? Well, that evokes a sense of separateness, physical separateness, and yet a lot of our physical connectedness also brings with it emotional connectedness. A hug, a touch, a laugh, a good time over a meal. Those types of things that we can't do right now can further help us to feel more isolated and alone. Now, add to that other things that are happening to us, perhaps individually and definitely planetarily. We're hearing all the time about new possible problems. We have hornets, murder hornets that are out there. A lot of us are, and the world, of course, is being impacted economically. There are questions about food distribution. You know them all. I mean, there's a lot of things that are potential boogeymen out there that are on the horizon. That may or may not impact us. We just don't know. And part of that uncertainty, I think, is what really tests our ability to get through the day in a joyful way. So how do we get through this? How do we get through these tough times? And how do we transcend this sense of isolation and this sense of feeling that we are alone and that we cannot make a difference in beyond what we can do in our own lives? I'd like to share with you something that I learned pretty early on when I first came to Ananda. I came in 1997 and moved to the Palo Alto community pretty much right away. And shortly after I moved in, Swami Kriyananda was there in that area because at that time there were a variety of legal issues that had to be dealt with, and they were all being dealt with right in our area. So we had a lot of folks from Ananda, including Swamiji, spending a lot of time in the Bay Area. Now, this was a time also for him personally of health issues, as he often experienced nagging problems, some quite serious, problems with Ananda, going through litigation over many, many years. A lot of burdens on him personally that some might say would be very onerous. Some that I know many of us would want to take shelter from and would want to find a way of place of refuge, whether physical or at least emotional refuge. But Swami, being who he was, saw an opportunity to be more than that. Shortly before I came, there had been a bad earthquake in Assisi, Italy. And Swami decided that fall, in the midst of all of these travails, that he was going to do a benefit concert for restoration to help the basilica in Assisi, which had severe damage to its structure as well as to many of the beautiful frescoes from the Middle Ages. People had been left homeless, that many thousands in that area, no electricity, lots of problems. So Swami's solution was to have a concert. And he had a concert at the Ananda Temple in Palo Alto one evening. And it was a wonderful event, and the first time I actually was in his presence. So I was looking forward to it, and I volunteered to usher, got to the temple early, and was there for him doing sound checks and doing, getting set up in the mics and just getting kind of ready a couple hours before the event was to begin. At that time, Swami wasn't wearing his robes all the time, so he had this white jacket on, bright blue shirt, looking very refined, I guess is the word for it. Swami did have a refined character and appreciated uplifting and beautiful things, and to present that in himself as well. But I also saw in him, beyond the physical, I could see his joy level, I could see his leading with his heart, in his interconnection with others, with his perfectly being in the present moment, with his sense of dedication to what he was doing, and with the beauty of the music. I mean, we have some of the most beautiful and most inspired music I've ever heard, and I think many of us have ever heard, because it is coming directly through him from such a high source and through such inspiration. How can you not? When you hear truth, you recognize it. So as the evening went on, and as after it finished, knowing that, as I did at the time, of the travails that Ananda and Swami personally were going through, left me even that much more inspired by that evening to see that the lesson for all of us is that when things are challenging and difficult, we can transcend what's happening to us personally by getting bigger, by expanding, by keeping our heart open, and by serving, and by getting outside ourselves in ways that will make for our own joy and for the joy of others. And that's what I saw in Swami. And fortunately, I got to be with him for many, many years. Not many years, but quite a few years until he passed away in 2013. And though I wasn't in the inner circle, I was always on the fringes with him through his writings, through his visits, through my hearing him speak several times. There's always that consistent message of discipleship, of service, and of being that disciple, that inspiration for all of us. Swami did everything as the disciple of a great master, and I could see that and feel that and learn from that through joy comes service. Asha recently gave a talk where she explained that the biblical phrase, it's better to give than to receive, was, according to Swami, actually misinterpreted. That it really should have been interpreted, it is more joyful to give than to receive, because better implies a value judgment or a comparison, that there maybe is something in it for me, whereas it's just the fact that it's a more joyful and expansive experience for all of us and what is life's purpose but to seek joy. So it's more joyful to give than to receive. So where does that leave us in this crisis, using Swami's inspiration, using everything that we know on this path? Well, it leaves us in a place where we can make a difference. We can be instruments to transcend our own sheltering in place, our own social distancing, and be expansive, to not distance our hearts and not to close our hearts, but to reach out in small ways to others, to write a letter, to pick up a phone and call someone you haven't spoken to. I know a lot of that's happening these days, where we're hearing from people or making calls to people we haven't spoken to in many, many years in some cases. Making a small donation to an organization that you believe in that's helping others. Seeing if a neighbor needs something. Those small ways, prayers and meditations dedicated to peace, to health, whatever that might be. Getting outside ourselves is really the key to happiness. It's better and more joyful to give than to receive. So I hope that this talk finds you inspired to some small degree even to want to go out and make a difference and maybe pick up a phone and do something, some small thing. As Mother Teresa said, do ordinary things with extraordinary love. If you can do one small thing and engage your heart in service and in devotion, then that's the difference that we can all be in this world right now. So I hope to see you all soon in person, and take care.